Hello and welcome to another video. Today I want to show you my leveling build for the Merc class. Actually, it does not matter which ascendancy you pick. I leveled without one for most of the campaign and picked up the gemling later, which I want to use for the endgame build, if I can afford it. This build is based around the Galvanic Shard skill and uses elemental lightning damage to rip through enemies. You will be blasting non-stop without breaks, never stopping, obliterating everything you come across while getting one shot by some bullshit occasionally killing you because you missed one single dodge roll. Around the third act we will be getting the shock burst rounds for single target damage, and later we will be getting the plasma blast for some burst damage on bosses and shock application to really get stuff done. The leveling process was actually quite enjoyable, except for a few instances of random bullshit driving over your dreams and killing you because you thought clipping an attack by just 1/4 pixel is okay. The overall playstyle is very drive-by like once you get your equipment sorted. It's actually much easier now to get stuff going with the increased drop rates to everything, and the market is being flooded with cheap gear you can pick up for a few pieces of your soul. Anyway, let's get this one over with and show you the actual build and progression. Now let's show you the skill tree. The first one is the ascendancy. You can go with whatever you want. The witch hunter with the explosions is probably the best for leveling, but you clear everything instantly anyway, so you don't really need it. I was running the crystalline potential early on, but some of the skills and the quality of gems is bugged and doesn't increase anything at all. So increased clip size. Well, guess not, but I actually want to go with the gem studded, but I need to unlock this one first. I wanted to go with a different trial first, because the two section of trial, when you do this one, before you do the tutorial chaos trial, you are going to get your skill points for the ascendancy, and then you can do just a free stage one and still get your ascendancy free upgrade without having to suffer through a 4-stage sanctum. Anyway, skill tree. We go with the projectile. We could potentially go with 2 attack speed here, but I really like the additional projectile damage early on, so you burst everything down. Then you path down here through ricochet, basically just more damage, more damage. The weapon swap speed is only important once you get your shock burst rounds. Without those points are useless, so those you pick up later. Then you path all the way down here and you pick up some emeralds with shock chance, lightning damage, magnitude of shock, whatever. Increased projectile damage, shock chance, projectile damage, and so on and so forth. So all your gems, you will get a ton of gems. Gems are very potent in this game and you can pick and choose your stats, especially shock chance is very, very important to get on this build. Now we path to instant reload, so a ton of quality of life. You could potentially go with increased movement speed, but 4% is basically nothing, especially since you need to kill stuff first. We pick up attack speed and blind chance later. I'm currently working on this cluster. But you really want to pick up the lightning rod as well as flash storm for penetration and force of nature. So you need around 30 penetration during the early game, the mid game, and potentially early end game. The pinnacle bosses have 75 resistances, so you need a little bit more, but we have some available here. So you can pick up around 30 points here and then grab a jewel and you're done. So you don't need to apply exposure or anything else on your gear, and you can path down here. Pick up all the jewels, pick up Maiming Strike. Maiming is really good for slower movement on enemies and reduced evasion rating. The slower movement is what you really want enemies to be debuffed with, because enemies will be slower and slower enemies cannot hit you, and your best defense is damage and keeping enemies far away from you. Then you have rattled for shock duration. This is really, really important, as well as magnitude of shock. This is a massive increase to your damage and you really want to pick this cluster as soon as possible. We also have electrocution, but electrocution is now based on your voltaic grenade damage, so you need to apply this one a bunch of times until you get the 20% more damage on enemies. So I'm going to pick this much later, not now. We also have crit clusters here, but we do not go crit. Crit is very, very, very bad early for this build. And then we pick up 15% maximum lightning damage. So very, very starved for points because we're going to travel a lot, but you need to travel a lot because you need strength and you need dexterity for a ton of stuff. So most of your power comes through emeralds. You need emeralds. Those can be pretty easy to pick up with just increased projectile damage, so you are not losing out on too much damage. If you do not want those, you can path up here and pick up those points here. 40% more damage, 12, 12, 12, whatever. And you also have 12, 12, 12 here with a little bit of quality of life. Later on, once you swap constantly between the shotgun burst and the shock burst, assault rifle and your plasma bolt, you can use full salvo, which is pretty good. Next up, let's talk a bit about our skills. So for the skills, we're going to utilize our basic attack at first. This is very, very important with Pierce. So Pierce is going to be your first pickup. You can also pick up stuff like Lightning Infusion for 25% more damage, because cold and fire damage is not very important for our build. You can also pick up Martial Tempo for 25% more attack speed, which is very, very good. Attack speed also influences your reload speed, so you have less downtime when using your skills. Voltaic Grenade got nerfed into the shitter, so this one is basically not usable early on. Builds up like 7% or 3% of electrocution buildup, which is basically nothing. So you're not going to use Voltaic Grenade at all. Flash Grenade can be useful during leveling to stun up enemies. Fragmentation rounds are going to be your bread and butter until you get your Galvanic Shards at level 5. Galvanic Shards benefit greatly from elemental damage on your weapon, because it only converts 40% of physical to lightning. This means you want a weapon with lightning damage. In this case, it's okay to go with physical damage already, because we can provide our weapon with a ton of physical damage, which we convert with our other skills to be more effective. But during the early leveling process until level 30, possibly 33, 35, you don't want physical increased slotted into this weapon, but you want a lightning elemental damage, especially since your lightning elemental damage is lucky, meaning a roll between 1 and 10 is going to hit 7 or 8 most of the time, because you roll 2 times. So it's much more likely to roll higher and you get more flat damage this way. And this flat damage is then added to all your stuff at a certain attack damage percentage multiplier. That is going to affect how much damage this one is going to deal. The quality here affects the bolt reload capacity, which works on the skill, but on shock burst rounds, sadly it does not. So this one has 16 bolts loaded into the clip, 16 as you can see. Shock burst rounds we should get 3 additionally, but we do not get this. This makes me a very sad gemling. Anyway, once you get your Galvanic Shard, you're going to slot in Primal Armament as well as Fork or Pierce. During early game, Pierce is going to be much better, since you're going to use the skill on bosses. This is going to be a boss DPS, so you want to slot in something like this and don't have Fork or Lightning Infusion in this specific skill. More elemental damage. Later on, once you get your third slot, you want to infuse this one with Lightning, deals more damage. And once you get Fork later on and you have your Shock Burst rounds, you're going to exchange Pierce for Fork. This is going to be much better clear, and you will still be able to shock enemies with this specific spell in combination with Voltaic Mark, and you're going to be able to burst on bosses with this one. So that's very important. The next pickup is going to be Voltaic Mark. You want to shock enemies, and the effectiveness of shocks on marked targets is increased. So you can shock a target, then apply Voltaic Mark, and it dynamically will increase the damage you deal to them, because the shock will increase from 50 to 69, for example. So you can then use your shock burst rounds, which will now pulse on a shocked target and deal much more damage to them. For Voltaic Mark, you can go with increased duration. Very good. But I have the increased duration on emergency reload, because emergency reload will empower our loaded bolts by 23%. Cooldown is very lengthy, so we decrease the cooldown and we are going to apply empowered, again 15% more damage. So we reload with emergency reload and then we burst down targets with a ton of damage. Now for shock burst rounds, concentrated effect works. It has the AoE tag, so even if it's just a small tiny micro AoE, it's going to be still affected by the 40% more area damage. Then we have Martial Tempo for more attack speed and faster reload. And we have Elemental Focus, because we actually don't really apply shocks with this one. So we have 25% more damage with this one. And lastly, we get Plasma Bolt with Scatter Shot. What this one will do is you charge up your Plasma Bolt. Then you can shoot 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, because you have 3 projectiles. It shoots 1 projectile, then a second, then a third by clicking the skill again. This makes this one to deal much more damage, despite basically dealing 20% less damage. So you have much more chance to apply a shock at a high value. Then we apply Overcharge for 75 increased magnitude of shocks, and we have increased shock duration, because we lower the shock duration, but we also want to increase this one. And with the 3 passive nodes, we have time for 2 burst rounds, possibly 3 burst rounds with the shock burst if you're really fast. You want to pick up the weapon swap speed, because it's going to feel very clunky if you are not playing with those. Crit is very point intensive, so I do not recommend going with crit early on, especially since the weapon only has 5% crit strike chance. So you can increase this one to 6 by picking up this point. And then you need additional modifiers on your weapon to increase the crit even further to around 12 or even 15%. Otherwise, this weapon is not going to cut it. Later on, you can swap to crit, especially since you can go with a power charge setup for the sacrifice of a chest slot. And then you're going to start blasting. But that's the end game version of the build. And there is also the instacker one, but it's very hard to do because you lose all your health and accuracy. So you need the special amulet providing you with 100 stats, but it costs way too much. So it's currently not available to me. Now, as far as gear goes, first up, you're going to start the game. You're going to go to the gambler and then you gamble for a crossbow that has elemental damage. Doesn't matter what elemental damage you will find, slap it on your character and you're going to blast through the game. Until around 6. At 6, you're going to find another one, again at the gambler. You're going to equip it with a little bit more physical damage, but elemental damage is what you want to find here. And then you're going to slot into Artificer's Orbs, and then you're going to slot in Storm Runes. That's going to be an insane power spike for you, and you're going to use this weapon until around level 20. At which point you want another weapon, and you do this one again. You can also trade for a weapon like this one. This one cost me 1x. Yes, this weapon is at around 250 DPS. That's absolutely insane for this stage of the game. I have picked this one up at around 35, leveled to 38, slapped it on, and I am still blasting with this weapon. I'm obliterating the campaign. So a weapon is going to be what you want. If you're going to struggle, try to look for the official Path of Exile site. It's basically Path of Exile trade. After the trade, you put in a 2. And that's the official site. You can find all those weapons by just buying them from other players. Like for example, this one I have been using very early on. But again, this one doesn't have the increased elemental damage. But if I slotted in 2 times the elemental damage here, I would have a much higher DPS weapon than I have with their physical damage. For the rings, very easy. Pick up a white ring, then transmute it, then augment it. And you're going to find a ring that's providing you with pretty good resistances or health or whatever. I found a ring like this one, with just the maximum life, slapped on cold resistance, rerolled it, and I have a pretty good ring for the campaign. Same with this one. Chaos resistance does not get a penalty, so with this ring I constantly have 21 chaos resistance, and with the amethyst charm you basically don't have to worry about chaos damage at all. Very good tip. With just 2 slots you are golden here. For your boots, look for movement speed and then a secondary stat like lightning resistance. For a belt, I picked this one up in a chaos trial. Very good belt. It's really good, but I cannot craft it any further. For the gloves, you want to look out for maximum life, life per enemy hit, mana per enemy killed, and lightning and physical damage. Attack speed can also be pretty good, but those are the stats you really want to focus on. For your amulet, elemental resistances, life, same for the body armor, same for the helmet. Now, this sums up the video. If you have any questions, please comment down below. I will update this one once I reach endgame, which is in like 30 minutes. And blast a little bit through the maps and see how this one performs later on. Currently I am at 1.5k life. The potential cutoff point where a build is garbage is 1.5. With this life pool you can get to around tier 4, tier 5, tier 6 maps, after which you will get completely obliterated. So you need a life pool that's around 2.5, potentially even 3k. So you want to focus on strength and maximum life on your gear. Cap your resistances, cap your health like this one, and stack as much evasion as possible. Anyway, with that said, see you next time. Bye.